does seem that Marion's left out of the gang more and more lately. Maybe it'd do her some good to have a little party.
Hi everyone, so the purpose of this project is to make a comprehensive evidence-based guide on optimizing muscle hypertrophy. This project is necessary because of a lack of uniformity in the bodybuilding community, and for the average person, the sheer amount of conflicting advice can be daunting and maybe even deter those looking to start building muscle. So, as you can see here, there are many different types of working out, from calisthenics to bodybuilding to powerlifting, and a lot more, and depending on your goals, one might be better for you. To get started, I want to define a couple terms. So the first is 1 rep maximum, which is the maximum amount of weight you can lift in 1 repetition. So the next is set and repetition. 1 set can be defined as how many repetitions you do in 1 group of the exercise, and the repetition can be defined as a single movement of the exercise you're doing, and a group of those makes up the 1 set. And just in general, I will be referring to muscle development as hypertrophy. In part 1 of this video, I'll be talking about 3 basic principles that you should follow in inducing hypertrophy. The first one is mechanical tension, or mechanical stress and load. And a quote from Current Diagnosis and Treatment, the 2nd edition, says that mechanically induced tension is produced by both force generation and stretch, and that the combination of the two create a pronounced effect. So we can draw from that the combination of mechanically induced tension, or isotonic movements of eccentric and concentric portions of a resistance exercise, can create the stimulus for growth. More on that later. The second principle we'll be talking about is muscle damage, and from an article by Brad Schoenfeld titled "The Mechanisms of Muscle Hypertrophy and Their Application to Resistance Training," says that once damage is perceived by the body, neutrophils migrate to the area of microtrauma, and agents are then released by damaged fibers that attract macrophages and lymphocytes. This is believed to lead the release of various growth factors that regulate satellite cell proliferation and differentiation, thereby promoting hypertrophy. What Schoenfeld is saying here is that the muscle damage that is perceived by your body, which then creates this environment for growth, is actually the part where your body induces this hypertrophic response to grow, whereas mechanical tension is the stimulus to cause this growth. What Schoenfeld is outlining here is basically the repair process that your body goes through because of stress induced by what we mentioned earlier, mechanical tension, and what we're going to talk about next, which is metabolic stress. So the next part is metabolic stress, and a quote from Schoenfeld defines it as a manifestation or a result of exercise that relies on anaerobic glycolysis for ATP production, which results in the subsequent buildup of metabolites such as lactate, hydrogen ion, inorganic phosphate, creatine, and others. Similar to mechanical tension, metabolic stress is also a result of resistance training. However, it is actually the part where your muscle swells, also called cellular swelling, where the body creates this very acidic environment wherein the muscle fiber damage is increased, leading to greater hypertrophy. So that burning sensation you get when you do a set of 10 or more repetitions is an indication of metabolic stress. Schoenfeld and the Current Encyclopedia say that muscle hypertrophy is not induced by a part of these principles, but by a combination of all 3. In part 2, I'll be talking about the optimal techniques of weightlifting. For this next section, we'll be talking about the difference between isotonic and isometric movements. Popularly found in bodyweight exercises or calisthenic exercises are isometric movements, which basically means the exercise is performed in a static hold, like an abdominal plank. A thesis by Randall Brown titled An Electromyographical Study Comparing Two Methods of Inducing Muscle Hypertrophy in the Upper Arm found that isotonic movements are superior to isometric movements in activating muscle. This is an interesting development, as I was told in my high school track team that planks were the best exercise in developing the core. So getting a little bit deeper into isotonic movements, we'll be talking a little bit about the benefits of the eccentric portion of an exercise. A test by Corratella and Shenna concluded that the eccentric portion of an exercise is significantly more beneficial to strength and hypertrophy gains. The eccentric, or the lengthening of the muscle, is not only the more difficult part, but the most beneficial part of the movement. It is important not to neglect this portion by bouncing or using momentum to get the weight up. Neglecting the eccentric portion by cheating your way up eliminates the most beneficial part and reduces maximal hypertrophy. Eccentric specified training has also been highly recommended to breaking training plateaus. This is because you can maximize and overload mechanical tension by using heavier weights that you normally couldn't lift. Usually, you would use a training partner to help you get the heavier weight up so you can avoid the concentric portion. Then you would proceed to lower it by yourself through the eccentric portion as slowly as you can. Alright, so let's move on to the topic of full range of motion. If you ask any trainer, go on any YouTube tutorial nowadays, everyone is likely to tell you that full range of motion is the most important part of training. This is usually because it ensures that you fully stretch out the muscle during the eccentric portion of the movement, but the thesis by Randall Brown I mentioned earlier says otherwise. The study by Brown compares two types of movements, neo-isotonic and the classical isotonic movements. So by classical isotonic movement, I mean the traditional curling up and letting down of movement with full range of motion, meaning that you would curl all the way up, squeezing the muscle at the very top and letting the muscle stretch all the way down. What Brown defines as neo-isotonic is a movement where the range of motion is changing throughout the sets. So for example, for set 1, you would do a regular set with full range of motion up and down, and for the second set, you would only go halfway and go back down. For the third set, you would go from halfway to all the way up and back to halfway down. This type of training is commonly known in the bicep 21 curl exercise.